about 2 years in recruitment, I had stopped candidate calling. I didn't do any. What I had I had about between 10 and 12 at any one time, what I call repeat referrers.
Welcome to the Tech Savvy Recruiter, the podcast for recruitment and staffing agency owners keen to explore the tech innovations reshaping our industry. I'm Andrew Roger from RecMate.
And I'm Belinda Kerr from Recruitment Garage, and together we're your hosts bringing you a stellar lineup of tech experts ready to help you understand and, more importantly, benefit from the increasing array of tech available to you today.
Welcome to another edition of the Tech Savvy Recruiter podcast, and today BK and I are very excited to have David Cahill from HireSplit. With 15 years plus in the recruitment space, and I'm sure he'll have plenty to share about how recruiters can leverage technology to drive referrals in a tough market that we're having globally at the moment for most IT and other recruiters. Welcome, David. Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and maybe a bit about HireSplit as well?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, Andrew and BK, thank you very much for having me on today. My name's Dave Cahill. I've been in recruitment for about, give or take, for 15 years. Was one of the original staff at Liquid Personnel in the UK, which we grew to about 120, 130 staff. And sold back in 2016. That was predominantly health and social care, with about 90% of that being contract. Following that, I had a bit of a hiatus where I set up a service accommodation business, but then returned to recruitment in Hong Kong, covering Hong Kong and Singapore, working for Gravitas, which is obviously quite a well-known tech and finance business. And from there, really, and then for HireSplit, the motivation from us building this came from my experiences of leveraging my network and especially leveraging referrals to get where I'd got. One of the biggest contracts which I won in both businesses, the initial element was all through a referral. So being referred in to the C-suite or into HR, and leveraging my network based on my reputation or based on our company's reputation to really go out and win long-term exclusive retained business. On top of that as well, obviously, there's the candidate side, which is where HireSplit kicks in. So I would say after about 2 years in recruitment, I had stopped candidate calling. I didn't do any. What I had I had about between 10 and 12 at any one time, what I call repeat referrers. So these were people within the market that I could turn to for any job which came in within my niche. And they were so well trained. Trained is probably a horrible way of saying it, actually, if anybody ever saw that. But so our relationship was so good, but they were so well trained that literally they wouldn't find me through 10, 15 people, because that's not what I wanted. There was between 3 and 5 passive candidates who could do that job. And what we've built HireSplit for is basically, rather than it being your biggest biller who is doing this, the entire offices. The whole ethos of HireSplit is to turn your either existing contractors or your existing candidate pool into an extended arm of your recruitment business, and basically enabling these guys to be your resources for you.
Dave, that's really interesting. One thing I was going to ask is your location, because that's fascinating as well. You're a startup, so let's talk a little bit about that before we dive into a few quick questions I've got for you.
Yeah, so me and my business partner actually met in Bali during COVID, just before my move to Hong Kong. We were batting forth ideas for about 2 years before we eventually came up with HireSplit and decided to take the plunge. Now, obviously, at that point, we both quit our jobs and went all in. And being very open with you, Roger, my living expenses, my flat rent alone in Hong Kong was 8,000 Australian dollars a month. And so I very quickly realised that our runway would be coming to quite an abrupt end if it's staying there. So we literally looked at where did we want to live and where the right infrastructure in order for us to launch in APAC. So we all moved to Bali. So we've been here since January this year. We did the initial build from here, also utilising our development teams based over in Cambodia, and then did our initial launch from Bali but into Hong Kong and Thailand back in May. So this one is this bright, glorious sunshine behind me, not the wet Manchester skyline, as my accent might sometimes suggest.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, from what I've heard, it's a great little technology/entrepreneurial hub at the moment in Bali. It's good fun.
It's amazing, actually. I mean, I've been, this is my third stint here. But when we sold Liquid, I came over here for a couple of months more as a tourist. And, comparing Bali to where it is now, no comparison. My local gym is 90% tech entrepreneurs. So there's a real nice little community here of people who tend to be on the extreme ends, either in our stage where they're in their first year or two and just starting out and launching, or on the other side where they've either set up a lifestyle business or exited themselves. So there's a nice little community, and it's only getting bigger. Although if that does mean that the traffic's getting worse, so it's which is a little bit annoying.
It's a bit scary, yeah. To spend some more time there. I've just been there as a tourist before, but seeing a lot of
the next podcast we do, guys, you'll have to come over here.
I'm never going back to Bali. I've got a story for another day, but it basically ended up in me pretty much ending up in jail in Bali. So I'm out of there.
Gosh, that's going to be a fascinating podcast. BK?
I'm more interested in hearing about this than I am talking about HireSplit right now.
It's a pretty interesting story. Let's just say it involved the Australian Embassy.
Can we swap stories now? No, we'll stick with Dave. Spinning back to what we're here for, leveraging tech-driven referrals in a tough market. With that, I guess, cap on, can we just have a little bit of a chat around what your focus is or what you're seeing with technology being a really strong tool for BD being a priority at the moment for most people that are selling in the recruitment space, and how it can drive referrals and support both the candidate and the client side of the fence as well.
I mean, I think in a tough market, the old saying of your network is your net worth could not be more true. And it couldn't, you are going to be speaking to people who are going to get contacted by most of your competitors, and you're going to need to do something to stand out above the crowd. When a role comes out to a recruiter, it's usually for a specific need. So it's either an incredibly niche role or an incredibly hard to find role. Now, in order for you to get that opportunity, the best way that you're going to get that is by demonstrating credibility elsewhere. And there's nothing else better than one of their friends saying to them, I've used Belinda before, I've worked with Andrew before, they did this for me, you should have a chat. That is going to override any of the mass marketing posts you're putting out to boost your brand and a personalised introduction. And that's the first step. Once you've got that introduction, the role you're going to be getting is not going to be like it was a couple of years ago, where it's 5 years plus Java developers, for example, which are relatively easy to find. Again, it's going to be they're coming to you for a reason. They've exhausted their resources. So your network at that point needs to be considerably better than your clients. The best way for you to leverage this is identifying people, not even who can do the job, but who know people who've got those technology skill sets. Now, the challenge you have here is these people aren't going to be looking at your job. They're not going to be engaging with it because it's not for them. They have the keys to people who do. It's about motivating these candidates to get into that community. And the best way to do that is to give them very clear access to what it is that you're looking for, so they can be at a conference or on a project, and they can identify what it is, and they say, oh, actually, my colleague, my friend here, my new connection is a perfect match. And then they're then able to send that through.
I think in any part of life, if you've got a mate who says, oh, try this thing, you're much more likely to try that thing, as opposed to pulling that thing off a shelf and giving it a go without any sort of testimonial or credentials from somebody that you trust or like. So interestingly, whenever we work with clients, we always coach that use your existing networks first. That's the best way to do it. So your existing database or your contractor network or your previously placed permies, if we can sort of work out a systematic approach for that, I think it works a lot more strongly. So I know that a lot of agencies out there aren't leveraging it as effectively as they can.
And I think especially in Australia as well, one of the, as you guys know, I'm relatively new to the Australian market. One of the things that I've seen very, very quickly is actually how connected everybody in the market is. You are probably only 2 or 3 degrees of separation from the majority of the people within. You can utilize your first stage network. You shouldn't be too far away from getting to the people you want to speak to.
It's interesting. I was having a similar conversation the other day with a colleague and saying, if you've been in a certain space, a niche perhaps, for maybe 3 to 5 years, and you've been working that niche quite well, then you're covering most of that through your network. So it does ring true, particularly with Australia being a smaller market than it makes it easier for you to develop that person of influence, that person that you want to be the go-to person for particular niches.
Yeah. So Dave, I'd love to know, so with the tech, because, we've all been asking, that question, who else do you know in your network? How does a tool change this process?
So the biggest elements of call is opening up and making everything transparent. Before we started building HireSplit, we not only did we drive down on my experience, but also my co-founder's experience. He's a 12-year experienced data engineer. We went out to the market and we kind of spoke to about 250 candidates based in the UK and the Netherlands. About 80% of those tech candidates, and we spoke to them about how they had experienced referrals so far. And the key annoyance that came back was transparency and relevancy. So the first one was, I make a referral and I never hear anything back again, or I've got to chase up my referral payment, or, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. And the second one was to refer into elements where, it's not even within my sphere. So you're asking a developer to refer a salesperson or something like that, which, they don't often come into contact. What we look at doing is getting rid of all that. The candidates can literally track the referral from point of what we call applications, point of referral, all the way through to placement. Like basically going through the journey with our clients, the highs and lows of the interviews, the drop-offs, etc. But it's all transparent. Once it gets to placement, exactly when we're going to get paid and go from there. On the flip side of that, though, it stops any nasty surprises. So, let's say someone's referred who's already, I've had this 100 times in my career, where a consultant takes a referral, they don't look at it on the system, and they just start working the candidate and they place them. And then 2 months later, I get an angry phone call. So I made that referral, what's going on. Now, that candidate's already on the system, but actually it hasn't been communicated. Again, the system's transparent. So they make a referral who is going to be declined for whatever reason, in line with the policies for our clients. They're told there and then, so there's none of this where it gets to placement and again it gets uncomfortable. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. I mean, in this, we're talking about this whole trust economy, aren't we, right now? And transparency is critical. And I think with all the tech and the AI, sometimes it can feel less so, but this is obviously pulling it out to make it more transparent. So, no, it's great.
I think it's about bringing your candidates as to be, part of the family, part of the business. It's bringing them into the fold and getting them to go on that journey with you. 9 times out of 10, if you've got a contractor who's working for you, you're going to have a good relationship with them. They're going to know your brand. They're going to trust your brand. You're paying them. You're planning them work. But it's bringing them further into the fold, or about that true equal business stature.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I really think sometimes that referrals are a unfortunate forgotten element of traditional sourcing. So you go through your traditional sourcing techniques, and if that falls short, you might think, oh gosh, I'll ring a few mates and see if they know somebody that can help me with this assignment. How can recruiters effectively leverage referrals to quickly generate strong candidates and obviously leading to strong sales?
It's amazing seeing how some of our clients are actually using the software now and really thinking outside the box. So a good example with a firm in Europe, which has built up a very good community on Discord. They are now not advertising their jobs on Discord. So what they do now is they go out to their community and they ask for referrals. And what they find is the quality of people coming in is a lot higher because they're being referred by people. Don't get me wrong, they've spent about 12 months developing quite a very niche community within a certain area of tech. But the quality coming in is high because these are people who are in the market and they know it. The candidates are engaging with their brand. They're basically doing their direct marketing for them. I think there's different ways that, you can utilize the lost art of referrals with tech. I'm just thinking about it a bit outside the box. Something as simple as LinkedIn. Or, now in my eyes, and I am an old school recruiter, if you are headhunting on LinkedIn, you're doing something wrong. You've got Lucia, you've got God knows what else out there now, where you should be able to get a mobile number. But if you truly can't get one and you truly can't headhunt them at their desk, etc., giving the candidate a reason to engage with you, which is going to benefit them immediately. I've got this job, this is what we can offer you to start engaging together. And it's giving that immediate gratification. So rather than being, I'm not looking now, I'll come back to them in 6 months. Actually, that might pay for that might pay for my Christmas holiday, that might do this.
Oh, I love that. That's such a cool thing because I think I hear people say it to me all the time, what's that kind of, we've connected, now what? And they're just waiting, the candidate or the client, whichever one it's going to be, they're just waiting for that sales pitch. That whole elevation of the relationship just moves a whole lot faster. So I love it. The other thing I love about this whole concept too is that I'm always a big proponent of working within a niche. I haven't had very many people come across my path, in the last few years that have been really able as a small business to make a generalist agency work. anymore. I think, very much 99% of the time, niche is is the best way to go. And what we're talking about here today really is supportive of that, because these candidates, if you're working in one niche and, let's just use Java developers, they're all Java developers, they're going to know a whole lot more Java developers. They're not going to know, civil engineers, or maybe they will, but they won't know a whole lot of them. So I love that side of it as well.
Sort of like, bringing the candidates into the fold, like even in a really tough business market, your candidates, in my eyes, are still the absolute key, because even when you get that job, that client is going to be expecting you to send people through quickly, because if you don't, your competitor will. Especially if you're a small consultancy, you need to react quickly. So if we can give you a tool which actually enables you to turn your small consultancy into, 10, 15 people looking for you at the same time, but more importantly, who are embedded in that niche, is going to add to your chances for success.
Yeah, it makes total sense, doesn't it? And I think, it's some hidden benefits there, not only the immediate ones of getting the referral, but also you're building that trust and relationship with that referrer as well. So they could be the next person you place when a job comes in.
Bringing them into the fold, there's nothing worse, I think. And I used to hear it on the phone all the time, where I'd like walk, because you do your forward walks, don't you? And you'd hear like some of the new recruiters phoning up candidates, how are you doing? It's like, we don't care how they're doing. You need to give them a reason to consistently engage with you. Right, that can be a multitude of things. It can be market information, but it can also be, engaging them with what you're looking for and giving them a financial incentive to engage with you moving forward until, as you very rightly said, Andrew, you finally place that candidate.
Yeah, the sense of community, I think, is powerful. For years and years, I think recruitment companies have tried to have that community of candidates, and often, unfortunately, it's just the database, right? So that doesn't transpire much past a collection of names, numbers, and email addresses in a database, and not much more happens in a general recruitment company, unfortunately. But if you've got these tools and these reasons, as you said, to keep in contact with a bunch of people that are specialists, then it just is a double-edged sword for referrals, but also keeping them warm and happy as well.
So, Dave, in what ways does AI improve the quality of referrals? Helping recruiters match top candidates on, let's say, high demand roles.
AI is growing and growing at the moment. I've seen quite a lot of demos recently from obviously our clients' own ATSs, which we're integrating with. And some of the matching elements that you have now through AI, from your initial job site through the ATS, is brilliant. Bring you up a short list of, 10, your first 10, and it goes on in order for you to start that journey. Through referrals, the same AI is used, or what the same type of technology is used. So we're able to do pre-screens for companies upon request. We're able to start looking as well at the data coming in. Because one of the things for me is you can have somebody who refers you to 20 people, but actually if they're not relevant, then you don't want to be engaging with them. What we do is we analyse the success ratios. So what I say, the system starts to present the top referrers for you for success, and sending the jobs out to them. And again, focus on that quality of people coming back in.
So how can recruiters then use data analytics to evaluate the return on investment of referrals in this challenging market?
I think, it's again, this is about utilising your ATS and the data going in. Like with any data, the analytics are only as good as the system is being used. So it's important before you the process is company wide, but how you're going to be doing that, judging, or checking on the sources of where your candidates are coming from, etc. From there, 3 main areas that we encourage our clients to look at. First one is obviously number of candidates going to interview. It's the number of the referrals coming in, which are going to interview within a 6-month period. That's going to be analysing the quality of the initial referrals coming through to you. From there, it's time to hire. So looking at what your time to hire is, what your time to hire has been historically, and how this has increased. And then the final one is percentage going to placement. Because for me, one of the things that I've always done is consistently analyse that last area. What percentage to placement has got the highest success rate? Because that's the area I'm going to be doubling down on my investment. So I'm going to be doubling down on the highest percentage to placement for candidates, and then going from there, basically.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I love some data in there. We all know how sales professionals struggle to put data in. So if you can systematically put a pathway of data being trapped and then flagged, that candidate came from a referral, for example, then I think the happier everyone will be.
And the good thing is, as long as everything is set up correctly at the beginning, a lot of that is automated now. As long as the pathway is set up correctly at the start, you're not relying on consultants to do that. Because let's be honest, I love consultants to pieces, but they are not the best at data input sometimes. So as much as that's what we can take away and automate for them, it's only going to improve.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I was just thinking as well, consultant behavior, that definitely has changed over the years that I've been in the industry. Traditionally, if I walked through a sales floor and it was quiet, I'd be, gravely worried about that organization's future. However, the way that people communicate is very different now. Some are via text, some are via email, some are via chat. And it's not necessarily making cold calls that you need to do on a daily basis. I still have a preference for that because I think that you can develop stronger relationships via voice than typing something, but that's for another day. But I was just thinking, how can tech-enabled referrals help recruiters build their client and candidate networks more naturally with that, I guess, maybe more resistance or new generation way of not making as many cold calls as you or I might have done when we were recruiting?
I've seen instances in the last few years of consultants closing through WhatsApp, not doing as much of the face-to-face element, which I think is a negative. People's confidence in picking up the phone and making a cold call is not as high as what it was in the past. One of the brilliant things with referrals, though, is that every call you make is a warm call. Every call you make is coming from a recommendation from somebody who knows that person to get in contact with. So it takes away cold calling, basically. Even your consultants, which are still adamantly willing to have a yes, you can phone me, just from them being able to send that WhatsApp saying, Belinda's recommended that I contact you, Andrew, WhatsApp time works, is still opening it up a lot warmer. I think it does help the new generation coming through.
That extra little bit of confidence, isn't it?
Thinking about best practices from your experience and what you see in the industry, what are those best practices for using tech to keep candidates engaged after they've been referred? There's great, you've got that initial point of contact, and then what happens next?
Big on here is keeping the referrer in the loop. It's making that process completely transparent. So at any time Belinda's referred yourself, Andrew, she's able to see in real time what's happening with your application and the success rate from this. Now, the way we do this is, by multiple. We do it by email, we do it through the app itself, where they can track. I think that to keep your referrers actively engaged consistently, it's about keeping them loop and celebrating. I don't know how recruiters do this now, but I used to celebrate interviews. I celebrate people being shortlisted. I celebrate the offers going out. The proper celebration is at the end when you've made a placement and they've started, of course. But recruitment's hard. You get drop-offs. You get 10 candidates being rejected until you get that one. So I like to take the little wins. And it's important here for you to share those little wins with your referrer.
Yeah, it's almost like a little bit of gamification along the way. Those dopamine hits of, we've got another hit. Do you do that? Do you gamify it at all? You could, couldn't you? Just have some,
So we do, yeah. One of the features coming out next year is actually it's going to be a points-based system where they start to get different points and hitting each different area. But that's very much in development at the moment. My co-founder would probably kill me for talking about that. Sorry about that.
It's all out now. It's all out now, Dave. So looking ahead then, what innovations, because you're obviously, you're crossing that bridge between recruiter and the tech space now. So love to know just generally, what innovations, not just in referral technology, but just broadly, are you seeing that are going to be making their mark on helping recruiters staying more competitive?
I think for tech in general, for recruiters next year, is going to be recruiters identifying which parts of AI and which parts of tech work for their individual businesses. There are so many options out there now. And, one of the key elements that I experienced as a recruiter and what is part of my discovery as a provider now is identifying what the business's needs are, what they're already using, and making sure that everything is integratable. You can have all this great tech, but if it's not working together, then none of it is going to get used. I think the next year, you're going to have a lot of recruiters obviously delving down into what the AI functionalities are. And the long and short of it is that everything that they're implementing at this point should be developed for consultants to do what consultants are good at, which is being on the phone and closing candidates. And that's it. Do you know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I always try and speak to people about where, what tech are you using? What pain points are you taking away? So, let's for example, compliance. consultants have always been bad at compliance. Right, what tech can you use to take that completely out of the hands of it? That's just one example, because it's utilizing the tech to take them from a phone from 1 hour a day to 3 hours a day instead, but being supported by warm leads and having a reduction of the administrative tasks, which can get out of control.
Yeah, amazing. I think, what you said there about the integration piece, that's really interesting. Obviously, that's Andrew's sweet spot, but I find talk to people, that's where they get it's so confusing. Like, oh my God, there's so many things here. How do I put it all together? Yeah. At the end of the day, they don't need every piece of tech out there. They just need what's right for them and to know what's out there. I mean, what I love about what you guys are doing is you've taken something that's quite traditional and made it, brought it into the realm of tech and made it even more powerful. What you're talking about is quite an easy concept for people to get their heads around. But sometimes some of the tech that's coming online, they're sort of struggling, going, well, how do I make that work in my business? But here's something simple that they understand the concept of, and it's just, putting that layer of tech over it. So Dave, love everything you've spoken about today, and really interesting to learn more about HireSplit. We've sort of given some examples all the way through of how that would work and relates to what we've traditionally been doing there. Is there anything else that you would like to say that you feel like would benefit the audience?
I've been picking up on what you said, on what you've just said last time about the different tech products out there. I've been going back to the data analytics, what we were talking about with Andrew. One of the key elements for when people are deciding what tech to use is analysing what's already working for you. Look at your placements. Look at your placements, where your candidate's coming from, where your job's coming from, and base your decisions around that. Because it's going to be a lot easier to improve what is already working well and scale that, and it is going to be to look at what's not working well and try and improve it. So that's always my initial advice. So the elevator pitch for HireSplit is very simply, we turn your candidates into an extended arm of your business and enable them to be your resourcing team. So we bring them further into your brand and improve the relationships from there on in, whilst generating you passive candidates through referrals. And that's as simple as we leave it.
That's absolutely perfect. And Dave, what's the best way for people to get in touch and find out more?
The best way to contact me is very simply at david@hiresplit.com, or do feel free to pick up the phone on 0436 863 508. I'm always happy to have a chat.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for coming on board. And, I know you're still relatively early in your journey, but it sounds like we spoke before, you've already made some huge wins. So some of the bigger guys are already seeing the value in this. So we wish you well. And, maybe we can have you back when you're a little bit further down the track and keep us updated and in the loop.
It would definitely be good to come back on. Thank you very much for having me today, BK and Andrew. I appreciate that.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Dave.
Enjoy those waves in Bali.
It's a bit late for me to be surfing now, but definitely, thank you.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Tech Savvy Recruiter. If you'd like to stay up to date with the latest recruitment trends and insights, make sure that you remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And also, if you'd like to speak to Andrew about turning your tech stack into your secret weapon, or myself around creating an agency that delivers you more money, more meaning, and more freedom, we'd absolutely love to chat. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support. We look forward to seeing you next time.